Afternoon or evening, depending on where you are. My name is Stefan Semmelroth, and I always love getting to talk with David and JM in any format, especially in public, because they are awesome. My background, I got into cybersecurity in 2001 when I got a phone call where 6 words were, "Wait, what happened? I will be right there." And that was a terrible yet great experience, and a transition that kind of kicked off some thought process in my mind that said maybe this is a direction I kind of want to go. So fast forward quite a few years later, degree in electrical engineering, went into the Army infantry, wanted to look at security from a different perspective. After that, went into the Army's CyberCore, defended a whole lot of really interesting, huge enterprise networks across a couple of continents. Then after I got out of the military, I started a veteran-focused cyber recruiting company, which then got acquired by StrataCore. So I'm the VP of Cyber at StrataCore, and I spend a lot of time looking at very fun, interesting networks and helping our clients resolve their security issues in any aspect that they have.
Great. Thank you, Stefan, sorry. So glad to have you on board here. And very excited to really get your perspective. Now, Stefan, you mentor veterans and help them break into the field. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Spend a lot of time with the population that I know and love, which is veterans. And of course, I try to publish as much as possible, completely open source. So I'm not just focused on that one niche. While that is my focus, I want to make sure that rising tides lift all ships.
I couldn't agree more, Stefan. And that's great that you're here with us today for this Ask Me Anything. And so all of you veterans out there, Stefan is definitely a great person to ask for recommendations for steering your career into cybersecurity and advancing yourself. So if you have questions, I encourage everybody, type them into the Q&A bubble there, and we'll do our best to answer those live for you. Okay, we've got a first question already from Matthew Burns. Stefan, I'll let you take that.
Okay, let's see. I'm clicking on the wrong panel. David, could you read it for me while I get
Sure,
caught
let's
up?
read this here. Matthew says, I just enlisted National Guard as 25B, IT specialist, headed to Fort Jackson and then Fort Gordon in the spring. I enlisted for a 6-year term and qualified for a GI Bill kicker. I'm at a crossroads between 2 goals I could accomplish during enlistment. First option is I could move up to E6 during my term and then reclass as 25D, Cyber Network Defender, which is MOS I believe I'd enjoy. My second option is to head back to college, and when I return from IET, go through green to gold and graduate as a second lieutenant with a bachelor's degree and try for a 25A signal officer slot. I've got a feeling I know which option you'd pick, but wanted to hear your honest opinion on what you feel would be a wiser decision. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your service to the community. Matt.
Matt, man, thesis. We're starting it off. We're going deep. All right, I'm in. Okay, so yes, let's talk through all those. And I don't think it's an either or option. And I think that's one of the cool things that we can talk about, because you've got other options with you for different aspects. Especially, I'll try to stay away from all the isms for the Army stuff down at Fort Gordon, but you've got other opportunities for tuition assistance where you can do both school and service at the same time. And then you can always transfer that into green to gold after. There's a bunch of different routes that you can go. The 25 Delta specifically, that slot is, it's a very good slot, and they've reworked those programs significantly over the past couple of years to make sure they're substantially relevant and modern, especially with the Army's recent push, or the DoD's recent push to switch to DevSecOps pipelines instead of just traditional enterprise. So my answer would be to do both at the same time. And I've seen a lot of guys go from 25 Bravo, which is Signalier, over to the Delta side, which is the network defender side. And then also commission, don't rule out, oh, my colors are changing on me. We're back. Don't rule out the 17 series as well, which is the cyber officer, cyber network operations. And you can always cross branch. So if you're out and you go to school, you don't have to go back Army. You can go to any other branch that you want.
Stefan, I work with a number of veteran students, and I know some of the characteristics and qualities they build up during their time in the service do tend to translate nicely into a career in security. I was wondering if you could speak to some of those traits or characteristics that maybe a veteran prior service could translate into a career in cybersecurity.
Absolutely. So there's the answer that you're going to get from everybody else, and then there's, I think, a couple different fun answers. So we'll try to go down that path. The answer that you're going to get from everybody else is veterans are great. They show up on time. They do what they're going to say, and they're wonderful, and they work ethic. But there's the more fun answers of like, and you're not just fighting the enemy in the military. You're often fighting red tape as well. So when any type of policy, any internal structure, veterans are going to come in and they're going to look at it and go, wait, hold on. The onboarding process, that's a 90-day thing that should be in 45 days. Let's switch these things around to make sure it's faster and we get a better product. And they're not going to, maybe they won't use the word value or ROI initially, but you're going to have value and ROI very, very quickly because it's constantly push to a goal, push to a goal, push to a goal. And then when you overlay the fact that, like the other person said, the 25 series, so your network defenders, your signalers, your developers, your analysts, they are technical and they are on enterprise systems. And I talk to a lot of my clients all over the world and they go, hey, but Stefan, you were in the Army, you don't know enterprise. Well, what's enterprise? Is it 5,000 endpoints and 4,000 users? Is it 25,000? Is 100,000 endpoints with 15 different domain controllers with transitive trust that go across multiple continents in a fully virtualized instance with some sort of hybrid cloud and a whole bunch of different routing paradigms that are all based off of Cisco or something else? Then yeah, that is enterprise, and they are going to transition over with just learning a couple different acronyms.
Yeah. The whole definition of words that we use these days in cyber and describing these job titles in cybersecurity, it gets really murky. One person's definition can be a whole another definition for a different person. I know we even squabble over the term entry level. Is there even such a thing in cyber? That's a whole nother topic. I do know JM here, I'll let you chime into this question.
All right. Sorry, just getting my bearings here, David. Which question?
This first question, which was regarding the veteran asking educational path.
Yeah, so there's a lot of kind of like what Stefan said. You'll get different answers depending on who you ask, and education is important. But just coming at it from the angle of the recruiting side, the thing that I look for when I'm going through resumes is I'm looking for people demonstrating that they have critical thinking skills more so than maybe like all the certs, because I want them to be able to problem solve. Because what often happens is, you take a certification and it's an ideal scenario, but that's not always how it translates into the real world. Like, well, the A+ book says this. Like, one of my favorite things is there's one person on our InfoSec team. She took the A+. She came back. She's like, that is like not even true. Like, that is not how it works. Like, that is in theory how it's supposed to work. So I would say that if you are going to go the education route, just keep that in mind. Make sure you sharpen those critical thinking skills. But kind of along those lines, I just wanted to real quick touch on when you're applying, take a second to really read through the job description. Make sure if they ask for a cover letter that you do it. Don't just skip it, and say something about yourself, because again, you're trying to go through an ATS, applicant tracking system. It may filter out things. So yes, you want to check the boxes of like, yes, I have networking experience, or I have pen testing experience, but set yourself apart, because the cover letter often is the differentiator. If you have like two similar candidates where on paper they look the same, the cover letter for me will kind of be the tiebreaker. I don't know, Stefan, if you have any thoughts on the cover letters when you're going through resumes.
Yeah, so if my guidance in general is, if a company requires a cover letter, go for the cover letter. Otherwise, I usually find that it's a lot of extra work for not a lot of squeeze. And Jam, you kind of highlighted the applicant tracking system, and I think this ties in. So I know it's slightly adjacent, but let me hit it up, and I'll try to close it together. When you're writing a resume in general and a cover letter, there are 4 audiences that you need to consider when you're writing that letter. Most people are only going to write that letter for the hiring manager. But the hiring manager doesn't see, unless you've got the hookup, the hiring manager does not see that resume until it's been through all sorts of different filters. So Jam, you talked about the applicant tracking system. I could go for literally hours on ATSs and why they're bad. Let's just say that most companies aren't putting their best developers on applicant tracking systems, and user input validation is hard. So you get burned once with somebody getting root on your ATS parser, and you say, okay, then we're gonna drop anything. We're gonna drop anything that has a hyperlink in it. So we've got the hiring manager, we've got the applicant tracking system. So when you're writing any of this stuff, you need to do it very simply. Plain text, no charts, no graphs, nothing that an entry-level, first-level time programmer is going to look at and dump you because they don't know what it is. Then the other 2, you've got your recruiters, both in the company and external recruiters. And then you also have HR. So when you start thinking of all 4 different audiences that you need to target on your LinkedIn accounts, on your resumes, on your cover letters, it starts to get a little bit more broad, which means you need to tell a stronger story. And in the end, when I'm looking at a resume, the question I'm asking, and this is very crass, I know, how will hiring this person make me money? If I can look at a resume and say, this person will make me money because X, Y, Z, then I'm going to call them. And I think I've wandered away from the original question.
Oh, that's great, Stefan. And I was actually, I answered a question in our CSNP Slack the other day. Was the job seeker had heard of Jobscan for the first time, and they asked into the chat, should I be running Jobscan on all of my applications and tailoring each application to get over the ATS? And myself, I can speak to that experience. Having invested hours upon hours during my previous job search experience in the cyber field, looking to craft a perfect application, this platonic ideal. And what I found was I was investing, as you described, Stefan, lots of hours and time and very little return. So it really helped. It helped me the most when I had an inside reference. So somebody inside the company referring me to the position. And that was the point. Maybe I had also established rapport with the team lead or someone from the department that I was applying to. And at that stage, that was when my time investment into a tool like Jobscan or those devices, those software that are optimizing your application, and that's where your investment can really pay off. But cold applying and investing lots of time using tools and things, that's really tough, because you're ultimately, your one piece of paper, digital, so to speak, paper in a stack of hundreds, if not more. And cyber, even though there is a so-called skills gap, there are many unfilled jobs, it's still a highly competitive job marketplace.
Oh, absolutely. And I'll just dovetail a little bit on that. You should tailor your resume a little bit towards each application that you're doing. And usually what I say is, if you're spending more than 30 minutes on tailoring your resume for that job, are you actually showing you, first off? And then second off, if you're doing that much tailoring and you're going to go apply for 10 jobs, do you really have 5 hours of block to do it? And I always recommend have a solid resume that shows that you are capable and a competitor. If you can show that you are capable and a competitor on your base resume, then maybe you just change that career summary at the top, or maybe you just change 1 or 2 words that might tie in a little bit tighter.
I'll just piggyback real quick off of that. It's important. There's a question here: how to write a good cover letter. What are some things to cover? I would kind of echo what Stefan said. You want to tailor it, because if you aren't doing your research on the company, that looks bad, and it's probably just going to get tossed. So areas that I would cover is show that you've done some research on the company and what you bring to the company. What, Stefan said, a competitor, I call it grit. Like what I want to see the grit. Like I want to know that you're going to hustle, that you're going to work hard. You may not know it, but if you don't know, that you're going to figure it out. Like to me, that is something that can't be quantified, but is actually very important. At least for myself when I'm looking at the resumes.
Yeah, and there's definitely some things that'll show grit. Like if you were involved in a V1 product, or you took a product to market, even if it was outside of cybersecurity, holy cow, everybody understands how much hair you lost while you were taking that product to market, right? Like it is not easy. Other things that you could show, oh my gosh, I've seen some very good ones. If you're constantly doing capture the flags and you have like national level rankings, I know if you're doing one capture the flag a month, you are by definition a competitor. Period. So there's plenty of things that you can do to show that. And there's also cheating as well. Like I broke my back and had to learn to walk again. Not everybody, and I hope nobody else has that, but that sucks. Stefan is going to get up and he's going to keep moving towards whatever it is. And whatever the target is, I'm going to go get it. I'm going to figure it out. And if I can't figure it out, I'm going to go get help to do it. So I hope nobody else has that one, but yeah, show that you can overcome some adversity.
100% agree, Stefan. And I can definitely relate to the V1 product, how much energy it takes to do something like that. I can definitely connect on that level. And so, yeah, great stuff, everyone. And definitely, yes, I agree. Definitely tailor your application. Think about your audience. Think about what they're looking for and what kind of value do you bring to them? And what kind of contributions have you made in the past? And what kind of contributions will you make in this new role that you're interested in, for sure? Okay, we've got a few more questions here. We have an anonymous question. I am a CPA with experience in audit and compliance. I completed my IT audit certification, Cisa, and want to venture into career in cybersecurity. I tried to enter the field in 2016, but was not successful and left the job. However, COVID has given me another opportunity to join this career. Very interesting. Yes, there's definitely room for auditors in the cyber field. In fact, that's how we perform gap assessments to determine if an organization is achieving compliance. So I always point folks to cyberseek.org. Lots of good information there on how job titles feed into each other and how they line up in the cyber marketplace.
Yeah, I think I would say that for the person that had that one, you're already in cybersecurity. Like you don't have to go stare at bits and bytes to be an auditor. There's definitely different levels of auditor all around. And what I would do if I were you, I would target, like I would just go and figure out who are all the auditing companies that are out there that are going to know like what a CPA brings to the table, because they probably have a line item for that and are doing specific cyber audits. There's a number of them out there, and that's there's probably another question there. I might be getting ahead of ourselves here when I answer. To break into cyber, you don't have to go get a junior level job. You don't. If you are phenomenal at something, go do that something in cybersecurity. Get your cybersecurity merit badge and the stamp of approval. Whereas when JM looks at your LinkedIn page, he's like, oh yeah, this person's, they're clearly a cyber professional. I run across people all the time, sales, marketing, well, how do I break into cybersecurity? You're amazing at something. Go do that in cyber.
That kind of dovetails onto one of these other questions from Hilda. She asked, what advice or career path would you recommend to any newly certified cybersecurity pro with a background in marketing? So kind of echoing what Stefan said, if you are awesome at marketing, you can leverage that. You can, there are a ton of startups and cybersecurity companies who need marketing. So use that to your advantage. There is certainly an opportunity to blend those things. Technical writing or social media presence is such a big thing, especially for security companies. So my recommendation would be to highlight that when you're selling yourself to these companies, that you can level up the company because you have experience in marketing.
It 100%
goes
agree.
A long way. Go ahead, David.
Yeah, I wish we had Ria Galsam in here to answer that question. We have quite a few folks in CSNP with marketing backgrounds. Would be very interesting, their perspectives. Soren asks, I have an associate degree in cyber. I enrolled in a bachelor's in IT, and should I continue doing the bachelor in cyber? Question, I do have a Security Plus certification, but I don't have any job experience. I am 45 years old. What's my next step? Okay, interesting.
Okay, so that's kind of at that decision point, that fork in the road of, do you take your cybersecurity background and apply it to infrastructure engineering on the IT side? Or do you blend the two and focus on like getting to a company where they're struggling maybe to take their build out, like go from a DevOps pipeline to a DevSecOps pipeline, where you've got the background in IT and you'll understand quite a bit of the fundamentals there that the developers who are on the front end might not. That could be a great place to start. I won't tell you what thing you should do, because they're both great options and they both work really well. I guess my big question for you, Soren, would be, was your associate degree in cybersecurity applied or theoretical? Because those are two very different things. And if you hadn't applied, I think that usually goes deeper into IT faster than if it was theoretical. If it was theoretical, you may want to consider a bachelor's in cybersecurity, but you also have to look at opportunity costs, because you've already spent money so far, and does it transfer, does it not? If we were looking at it, Stefan would probably hire somebody with a bachelor's in IT if it was hands-on, over somebody with a theoretical background in cybersecurity, because you're going to be like, if anything from looking at IPv6 traffic to running an API, if you were hands-on, you're going to go further than somebody that's theoretical. If you're theoretical, you turn into me and you're a consultant.
There's a follow-up question on there, which is kind of interesting. The same one from Soren, where they're asking, how much programming do you need to know in cybersecurity? So this is an interesting question, because I am the first to admit that I am not a coder. But that said, it is important to know some basics, whether it's some basic scripting, Bash, maybe even a little bit of Python, because that will help you in many different cybersecurity fields. So whether that's pen testing, or DevSecOps, or even a SOC analyst, having those scripting, basic programming chops is definitely gonna help. So my answer would be, you do need to know a little bit of programming to be successful in cybersecurity. You can go without, but you'll kind of be stunted. You won't be able to go as far.
Yeah, agreed, Jay. Definitely. And the trend in tech overall really is, the latest big wave is kind of that automation wave, where we're trying to write code that makes our jobs, makes us do less of the little things, so we can focus our human attention on the big things. So a lot of enterprise SOC teams out there are trying to create automation that takes care of little incidents, so they can direct their professional attention on larger incidents. So that's where you might see an application of your programming skills. In other aspects, many tools in cyber are written in Python. Intelligence gathering tools, for example, very common to see those in Python. And most recently, many presentations I've attended are referring to attackers living off the land. So attackers that are intruding into your system to conceal their tracks, they're now using things like your own PowerShell scripts, your own command line shell interfaces to blend in with your day-to-day operations to make themselves harder to detect. So you can definitely believe that cyber attackers know their share of scripting as well.
And I'm a big fan of living off the land. I'm a big subscriber that the Windows operating system is the most robust attack platform that you can have. And Kali's great, but Windows has all the tools in it already. Just go get them, especially with Windows Subsystem for Linux. What do you want? It's there. Go for it. So to answer that, I think from my perspective a little bit more is kind of the question of which direction and route do you want to go within cybersecurity. If you want to be the guy or gal that's building the offensive tools, so that way pen testers can go out and they can automate and they can make things easier, that, yeah, you definitely should be looking at Python, C, C++, and Go, maybe a little bit of Java. If you want to go on the development side of where you're looking at, saying, applying machine learning and to some sort of like defense, then you should probably at least know Python and get into like PyTorch a little bit. If you want to go on, especially the West Coast right now has a big push for Go. So take a look at Go, and you can have a full career without knowing how to program. But at a minimum, you should at least know APIs and how to read code, especially if like, say you're doing your OSCP certification and you're about to launch something. You want to look at the code before you launch it, so you know what it's going to do. You don't necessarily have to be able to write in Ruby, but you should be able to read a little bit of Ruby before you hit fire.
Yeah, definitely, Stefan. If an attacker can get into your network and they can access a computer, all they have to do is privilege escalate on that system and just use the system's native shell language to do all the damage they want, really. So what we're seeing is attackers are not having to really reinvent the wheel. They can just use traditional systems administrator skills like scripting for their own nefarious purposes. All right, we've got another question here from a John Doe, interesting name there. I'm in the middle of my career and trying to change to cybersecurity, finding it hard to get a junior level job with my limited experience in the field. Everyone's asking for experience, but I can't get experience without getting a job first. A chicken and the egg there. So I have decided I've decided to volunteer my time with a company in the cyber field and also work on getting my Security Plus. Is this a good strategy? Is there something I'm missing? Should I be working on a different certification? I did see that SANS is offering an undergrad certification program, which gets 3 certs, but it's a longer program. Would you recommend that route or maybe something different? Thank you for setting this up, very helpful.
So I think this is a really common scenario that people run into, especially those wanting to get into cybersecurity, because you need experience before you can get the job, but you can't get experience without, it's very much chicken or the egg. So I think, John Doe, what you're doing, you're on the right track as far as like volunteering. That's great. But this is a good opportunity to talk about the importance of networking and things like informational interviews. So let's say that you want to get a job at Amazon, and you see someone in LinkedIn that works at Amazon. You can reach out to them and ask if you can do an informational interview. And what that is just kind of gleaning information about what their role is like, how they got into it. I really think that networking is important. If you're shy, this will actually help with your honing up those people skills. But networking, that is the best way to kind of get an inside track with getting into some of these jobs, because a lot of times, unfortunately, it is who you know, and sometimes people who get these great jobs with no experience is because they knew someone. So I would say, keep doing what you're doing, volunteering. If you're working on those certificates, I would say that is fine with the Security Plus. But then work on a lab, and then really try to focus on some networking. And you could even try to do a role where you can pivot. So maybe a help desk person that can get you in, so you get some basic experience, and then you can kind of pivot into another role.
Yeah, I like. Excuse me. I love the idea of pivoting. And John, I would ask you again, what was it you did before, and what are you awesome at? If we were to sit here and draw the Venn diagram of where John wants to go and what John is amazing at, go to where the crossover is. Very much go to the crossover. And I'm a huge fan of SANS. I think they do some phenomenal products, especially their CTFs on day 6 or whatever it is. I really, really enjoy it. Personally, I enjoy those. I think they're fun and they're great. And I think the benefit there is not just, especially for like a SANS certification, it's not just the material that you learn, which is phenomenal material, and the labs where you get hands-on time, but it's also the connections that you get when you go to a SANS class, when you go in person to the certifications, if you can. I still talk, well, when I was in SANS 503, Defense in Depth, About 4 hours into the class, the guy next to me was on his phone. And I was like, what is this guy doing? How can you possibly, like, we are doing hexadecimal analysis of IPv4. How are you on your phone? I'm barely keeping up with the instructor. I looked over, he was actually Googling on his phone, what is a port? We are still friends to this day. He's a great guy, and he surpassed me in ways that I like. He's got multiple CVEs and crazy things. So the point of there is two points. One, if you can do something that's in person or in a cohort or something like, webinars, do it, because those connections are amazing. You'll meet very interesting people that will be lifelong friends. And the second piece is, if you have an opportunity to do that, go with it. I do have clients that come to me looking for people that have SANS certifications. On the flip side, I have never ever had a client come to me and ask for CEH or Sec Plus. They're great certifications to have, but they generally test what you know, not what you are capable of. So knowledge, skills, and abilities or behaviors, they test knowledge. Most certifications, there are exceptions to that do abilities, but to answer your question, John, from my perspective, depends on which route you want to take. They're both great routes. And Jam hit on it as well. If you don't have a lab, you should definitely have a lab. It can be in AWS. It can be in a little pizza box that you buy off eBay and heats your room in the winter. Those labs should all be virtualized. You should be able to access those labs. Get an Apache, I'm going to say it slower because I know there's going to be questions on it. Apache Guacamole instance, so you can remote into your labs from wherever you are. Get a couple different things on it. Your lab should have 3 different things at least. They should have blue team capabilities, red team capabilities, and then the gray team. Your gray team should have like maybe a domain controller and some stuff that you might see in a network. The blue team capabilities and sensors should be there to watch what's happening in gray space. And the red team, anytime you fire a bad packet at one of your gray team people, you should be looking at your blue sensors, your defensive, to see if they're picking up the things that you just threw. And if they're not, then you got to tune those. So if you've got a good solid lab and you're in it, that lab should be on your resume. It should be on your cover letter. It should be API focused. And now you are ahead of the game because I know that you can do instead of just know.
Great point, Steph.
Things there.
Great point. Yeah. And when I was a hiring manager in the past for a small IT team, one of the questions I would ask everybody is, what have you been doing on your own to keep your skills sharp for the tech world? And when interviewees answered, David, I've been running a lab. I have a Dell server at home. I got off eBay. I've been running something like a Ubiquity wireless network to practice using these tools. And I really enjoy working with my lab at home, and I learn a lot doing it. And that to me is a powerful statement of just your abilities and not just your knowledge. And one more thing on that question as well, I love that you looked into volunteering. So when you volunteer in the cyber area, you actually get to make those human connections, and being friends, professional affiliates with people in cyber starts to demystify the industry for newcomers. Okay, let's see, another question. We have a lot of people here with mental issues like autism spectrum, anxiety, or depression. I know individuals who have excellent skill but face trouble socializing or communication with people in general. How do we support such individuals in the hiring process and assist them in becoming successful cyber professionals?
That's a really, really good question.
Yeah.
I think it would actually come down to the company, because there's this shift with companies trying to, really focus on being equitable, diverse, accommodating. So my recommendation would be to search out those companies. You can go, just do some searches on tech companies that do special accommodations for things like that, and you'll find several of them, and follow those companies. See what they're up to. Try to connect and network with people in there. But that would be my recommendation there. What about you, David?
Oof, that's a tough question. Knowing that communication is critical to success in your career through cyber, especially if you're on something like a SOC team and you're engaging users, you're engaging people verbally. Really, you know, I agree with you, JM. Look at companies who do it well. Look at their policies. Look at companies that make accommodations. And those are the ones you'll get ideas from, maybe to implement it at your workplace.
I think there's if you watch Silicon Valley and a couple of the other pop media things around cybersecurity or development, they are starting to have that in the narrative a little bit more now. And I think if I were in those shoes, a company that I would target is a larger company where there are like multiple sections within an engineering cell specifically, because then you can find a role that fits you, that if that's what you need, they have the ability to accommodate for that. So if you don't want to do anything client facing, you don't want to go with a small company. I mean, there's a couple different routes you can go there. I think companies are much more amenable to it now in general. And a personal experience in a cyber role, I had a subordinate at one time, a guy that worked for me, very good. And we sat down to do his monthly counseling, and it was going well. Check, but I just couldn't get anything out of him. And then later the next day, I came back in from lunch or something, and there was a written 3-page note that he had handwritten and put on my keyboard. And he just said, "I'm not good at communicating verbally. I apologize. I don't want you to think that I wasn't engaged, but I do want you to know that I took the things that you said. I'm going to work on that feedback, and here's some of the plan of action. And the best way to communicate with me is via writing." And I was like, "Oh, okay, I need to change my leadership style for this guy." And we did, and it ended up working well, and he progressed very, very well and has a lot of big wins. And I love that. It was just something that I had to realize that I had to change. So, you know, when you're talking with companies from the applicant perspective, be upfront about it. Like, I do not want to be in front of a client. I want to do X. I'm really good at regexes. Just give me regexes and PowerShell all day long. That is what I'm amazing at. But you have to find a client that has enough scale in order to do that.
Agreed, Stefan. Yeah, if you really want a specialized role where you know exactly what you'll be doing every day and you have a very clear-cut scope of work, enterprise size is where it's at for that kind of position. If you're willing to wear multiple hats and engage in a more dynamic workplace where you're performing different things every day, I would suggest looking for smaller companies or startups. Great opportunities there actually to build up a diverse array of skills in a dynamic and engaging environment. So never underestimate how much quality experience you can get even in a smaller business.
Mm-hmm.
Great question. Okay, next question is, are there any sort of specific or general certifications that would be good to get when looking for a cyber job? Or is it mostly about finding a specific company or niche that you can already contribute in and leverage that experience? JM, go ahead.
Yeah, so this kind of gets into the debate of certs versus degrees versus experience. But at a bare minimum, if you are trying to get into the cybersecurity field, I would say a Network Plus is a good place to start, because no matter what you do, whether you're doing, you know, you're just a general cyber expert, or you're doing SOC work or pen testing, or, you know, reverse malware engineering, you need to have some network fundamentals. So I would say, at a bare minimum, if you want to go that route, just get the Network Plus and build off of that. That's my opinion on that. Again, you're going to get different answers depending on who you ask. So I'd love to hear what Stefan thinks.
Yeah, this isn't a fair question because JM and I debate this quite often, actually. Okay, so from my perspective, yeah, the network fundamentals are huge. So anything that's going to help you answer the question of what happens when I type in a URL into a browser and hit enter. I know that's an age-old question, and it is a little cliche sometimes, but it is so much more than a DNS question. You have to be able to talk through every single aspect. So and I'll type back in here a second. You have to know what's going on your, potentially depending on what the client is or the employer. I need to know how my computer is translating a graph or a coordinate, whatever comes out into a USB controller and pushing it over UART to the system, and then knowing what the system fundamentals are doing up and forth before we even send over any packets. And then we have to jump into the entire OSI model and then go up and down the OSI model multiple times until we do an ARP request and then push out stuff over the network. And then eventually there's BGP that gets involved and back and forth. You don't have to know all of those things to be a cyber practitioner, but you should at least know that BGP, Border Gateway Protocol, oh my gosh, I'm blanking on the full thing. Border Gateway Protocol. I think I got it. Exists, and that it defines how networks connect to other networks, and then eventually you do get to a DNS question, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So in order to get to that, network fundamentals are important. Do you need to go get CCNA? No. Network Plus is a good place to start. Usually, what I recommend, based off of kind of what my clients are looking for usually, is somebody that can talk through those. So you can spend a few weekends and learn through that pipeline so you know what it looks like. You don't have to get a certification in it. Knowing a little bit of Python, knowing APIs very, very well, because you want to automate everything. Knowing a little bit about regular expressions. And then I usually actually point people more towards the AWS certifications like Solutions Architect, SysOps Administrator, and Developer. Because when you can communicate to everybody else that's sitting in the room, regardless of whether they're cybersecurity or not, you will get to yes and get to a win faster than otherwise. Those other certifications we can take a look at. I mean, there's other ones out there that are great, but AWS just has strong market penetration. I consistently get clients that are like, give me somebody that's solid in Go and AWS, or that want to be able to understand network fundamentals for Kibana on the Elk stack, et cetera. So there's a bunch of different routes that you could look there, and the vast majority of those do not require certifications. So sometimes certification's good, sometimes bad, and then when you get to like 4 or 5, depending on what they are, you really start to see a drop off on return of investment. Usually, unless they're SANS, CISP, or offensive security.
Yeah, cloud security is a big deal these days. We've seen lots of major organizations adopt things like Kubernetes. If you're not familiar, that's a cloud containerization platform, very useful tool. And we're also seeing a need for those companies to secure these new technologies. So there's lots of surplus up in the cloud for professionals who know how to secure those technologies. And many professionals currently using those techs are having to learn themselves how to secure them as well. Great technology really comes at the price of, well, how do I protect it as well? On the certification front, I typically recommend, if you're just looking for a starting point, you want to know what security is, and you're willing to just invest some time and get some knowledge, Security Plus is a fine starting point. Network Plus is great as well. A lot of their content tends to overlap a bit. So there's no harm, no foul in pursuing a cert like a beginner cert like Security or Network Plus. Just keep in mind, look at the market figures. Keep in mind, lots of professionals out there have Security Plus. So you really do, you want to think about, how am I going to distinguish myself in the current marketplace? So keep a pulse on what technologies companies are using. So research, hey, I really want to work at Google someday. Research, what technologies does Google use today? And what are they looking for when they're hiring security professionals? And that might give you some sense of kind of where things are headed, how things are doing now, what kind of skills are in demand. But as everyone here has indicated, many certs really only demonstrate knowledge. So you also want to demonstrate your capability and the fact that you can do quality work in a team environment, and that you have those really essential critical thinking skills, and not just be able to pass a test. So really, I never would steer you away from a certification, but just keep in mind there's a lot more to this realm of cyber than just that piece of paper, for sure. Great questions. Okay, Megan Crowley asks, you mentioned some debate over the term entry level in the cyber field. I'm actually at the entry level, that is 0 professional experience in the field. how do you recommend pursuing jobs which claim to be entry level, but then list a lot of required qualifications and experience that nobody who is actually entry level could reasonably have? The need experience to get experience requirement can feel like a major catch-22. And, you know, I think all of us can relate to that. I've seen job descriptions that ask junior entry-level SOC technicians to have CISSP. I've seen job postings that want entry-level AWS techs to have 20 plus years of experience. So clearly there's lots of work to be done on cyber hiring. JM, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, again, this is another tricky one because I want to get in with a company, I need experience, or I need this, but I can't get this, you know, without that. It's just like an endless circle. Again, I'll go back to like just starting somewhere. So even thinking back to myself, like I started out building computers and then got into systems administration and then got into security. And I know a lot of people that have pivoted in similar roles where maybe they were an engineer and then they wanted to pivot into cybersecurity. So, you know, if you're at an entry level, honestly, as weird as it sounds, just take what you can get as far as getting those notches on your resume, because that is going to help you kind of build on that. But it is, you know, that's a broader discussion, David, of like companies should not be recruiting in that way. Like I have a big issue with that. Like, you know, entry level, that's like 0 to 1 year experience, in my opinion. Like you should not be asking for 5 years of experience. And the bigger question, Megan, is do you want to work for a company that's like that? You know, because that says something about them. If they can't be articulate and say, you know, we're willing to invest in people and grow with them, maybe that's not the place that you would want to work at.
Yeah, interesting perspective, JM. Yeah, the entry level, it's kind of an overused term. There's lots of controversy. Some folks have the opinion that you need to be in IT and put in a few years on the service desk first. And I think the idea behind that statement is really that you don't want to go into a junior security analyst position and not really fundamentally understand the tools that you use. So that's why it is always nice to come from some kind of computer use background where you can hit the ground running and, you know, understand the tools, maybe improve the tools that you use instead of being really beholden to maybe a specific process of a limited tool set. So I would definitely encourage computer experience of any kind is going to feed very nicely into a career in cyber.
Yeah, and just to kind of echo that, you know, not to do a plug for Rubica, but the way that we, you know, kind of did it is I think back to this one woman who we have in the InfoSec department. She had some basic like IT troubleshooting skills, but she had, again, that grit. She came into the interview because she said, well, what kind of computers do you use? And I said, we use Macs. She literally came in, she's like, this is what I learned in a weekend on Macs, and I will learn more. And so we have gone from, you know, that spot to she's doing internal pen testing. She was part of the ISO. She like does cybersecurity videos now. So like that grit and drive, but like it was starting somewhere. And so really going back to like, you want to work for companies that will invest in talent, because the cybersecurity space is very competitive, and there are people who have a lot of experience, and then there are people trying to get in. So it's like this, you know, constant battle.
And it is, so a couple things. Megan, apply anyway. Apply anyway, because why not? Just because they've got a bad position description doesn't mean you should opt out early. And I say that to really anybody. Like, especially if it's just like on a LinkedIn, you click and it's submit and hooray. Don't opt out. Make them tell you that you're not a candidate. And let's talk. So I spent a lot of time working with companies, kind of coaching them on what their job descriptions should look like. Usually what happens, hiring manager says, I've got too much work. I need help. And then hiring manager gets approved through the chain. Some dollars get aligned to a position. And then HR comes to the hiring manager and says, hiring manager, what do you need them to do? And they're like, I just need them to be able to you pick the thing. I need them to be able to run basic level PowerShell and also have some sort of security mindset. And then HR goes, okay, cool. And HR types up a position description and they send it over to legal. And legal goes, well, they should really have all these other things. And the list grows. And then the junior HR person goes to the senior HR person and they goes, well, I heard that CSP is something that everybody in security has. That is a certification. We don't want junior people, so we want CSP. And they go, everybody should be able to get that. And they add CSP, and then they add a doctorate, and they add a second PhD, and then they add, and the next thing you know, the position description pops up as you need 15 years with Selenium development work. You need, or the testing framework, you need 15 years of Rust, which neither of these are 15 years old, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then it's marketed. The funny thing is they won't fill that position for a long time unless it's internal referral or something else. So eventually it'll change. When they do that, just submit, because why not?
Yeah, definitely always submit. If you're interested in that position, get an application in, reach out, email or LinkedIn, and really ask them what it's all about. Introduce yourself, ask for a coffee appointment. Never hurts to reach out. There's plenty more questions. We're about at the end of our time. I just wanted to close just on our thoughts in general on breaking into cyber right now. Given the world state, we've been hit with COVID, we have a social unrest, a lot of political movements taking place. I really want to just kind of poll the room here now that we've got us all together, us three, and just get perspectives on where's the industry at and what's it going to look like for someone to really be successful in breaking into it. JM, I'll let you go first.
Yeah, so it's an interesting time because I feel like the pandemic has just kind of just changed everything, so what we knew as normal and the traditional past we knew, I don't know that those are necessarily true anymore. And also on the flip side, there's this whole new attack vector. Everyone is at home, they're using their Comcast router or what have you, they're using company devices. We don't know how the home network is set up. We don't know if there are IoT devices there. I would say that for people trying to get into the industry, now is a perfect opportunity to, like we were talking about earlier, just get the lab going, get some books, do some Udemy courses, YouTube. I mean, they have tons of free stuff, informational interviews, networking, but cybersecurity, getting into this field, while it may be hard right now, it's not going away. I mean, I don't want to say it's a sure bet, but it's as close to a sure bet because we're not going to need less cybersecurity. We're going to need more. And Stefan can talk about the numbers of how many roles we need to fill. But, in the next few years, the cybersecurity field is really going to be leading the charge. I mean, you can go from every angle, from, monetary to political to all that stuff. It's going to be in the mix. So if you're trying to get in, don't be discouraged. We've all been there. I can remember numerous times where I knew I should have gotten interviews and I didn't. But it as cheesy as it sounds, it builds character. You have to have some grit and want it. And you just got to have that hustle. I'll kick it over to Stefan.
Yeah. Man, there's so many different routes that we could go with that. The first thing that a lot of my clients evaluate for is passion. So if you come in and they're like, why do you want to work here? Why are you a good fit for this? How is hiring you going to make me money? Do you like to do cyber in your spare time? And you get to that question and you're like, yeah, I mean, it's cool. You're gone. You're done. If you get to that point and you're like, I've got a great security onion instance on my house. I've security onion instance. I've done X, Y, Z. I pushed it over here. Last week, I just learned this whole new thing and it's a great because it does X, Y, and A1. And it is, oh my gosh, you're going to love this thing. And then you start telling them about GitHub accounts that they didn't know and they're starting to take notes. That is passion. And if you can't coach passion, so just try to show that you've capable and a competitor and drive it home.
Yeah, it's a different world these days. You know, back many years back, you could throw a firewall at the edge of your network and call it a day. And, you know, essentially perform security, and all you have to worry about are all the systems inside of the firewall, inside of the network that you're overseeing. Well, now we've got work from home, adding layers of complexity. How do you keep data confidential for employees that are working from home? So I really think we are going to see a drive towards like what we've already seen, but accelerated. So a drive towards cloud, a drive towards automation, and flexible ways to transmit data to each other, but also hopefully maintain privacy and security with the data that we are sharing and that we are using to work. So 100% agree that the demand for cyber is higher than ever. And it's really, it's up to all of us to pick up those skills that we see coming down the pipes and really think of creative ways that we can secure our systems and protect really with all of the political unrest, really the freedoms we have here stateside may depend on just having good security and being able to have a private conversation with a friend. So lots to think about, lots of social, political ramifications to maybe inadequate security systems in all sectors, public, federal, private, you name it. So this topic is not going anywhere. It's becoming more ubiquitous and mainstream than ever before. And I'm really seeing a trend towards getting more professionals of all stripes into the field instead of the opposite, which is maybe embracing the traditional hacker culture that cybersecurity is known for. So lots to ponder, lots of great thoughts today. Thank you so much, JM and Stefan, for joining us for this Ask Me Anything session. Obviously, we could go on for hours, but great questions, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. This has been CSNP Cybersecurity Non-Profit's Wednesday webinar. And you can check out our Wednesday webinar next week, which is going to be all about blockchain cybersecurity. So be sure to follow Cybersecurity Nonprofit on LinkedIn, Twitter, all social media. And you know, we're a volunteer nonprofit organization, and we champion the cause of cybersecurity for everybody. So we have lots of outreach programs. We do events just like these where we talk about the state of the industry and where things are headed. So thanks so much, everybody. This is a wrap, and have a good night, everybody.
Have a good night.